The second generation. The second generation took almost everything the first generation did and improved on it. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of much this generation did wrong, but let's dive right in. So first we're going to start on what it gets right. Number 1. The Pokemon. Even though there were only 100 new ones, almost all of them were quality additions. Some of my favorite Pokemon come from this generation. Most of these additions felt like they could have been in the first game because they so expertly matched the style of the first generation of Pokemon. My only complaint is that too many were related to the previous generation through evolutions and pre-evolutions. I'll also say that my favorite's probably Celebi, but Larvitar and Totodile are also really cool too. The starters. So much to say here, so bear with me. All three of the starters look pretty cool and presented viable options for your team. Totodile, for me, is the coolest looking starter of any generation. I mean, look at him. He's basically a Yoshi with teeth, which is cool as shit. Cyndaquil and Chikorita are both pretty cute too. As for their evolved forms, Crocodile was more of the same. A bigger Yoshi Gator. Nice. Quilava was pretty bland, but his design was slightly darker and edgier than Cyndaquil's. Bayleaf was pretty cool too, and was probably the best looking one of the Chikorita line. Feraligatr was a beast. It's a shame that the physical special split wasn't in play yet. He could have been even more valuable, although I used him on my playthroughs and he was always a viable asset to my team. Typhlosion for me was the best fully evolved stage. Again, his design was pretty simple, but at the same time worked perfectly to portray an intimidating dark monster. Flame Wheel was also a really unique attack. Meganium was pretty boring, and in my opinion was the worst looking of any of these starter lines. Meganium didn't quite have the edge or intimidation present in Typhlosion or Feraligatr. Overall, I would rank these starters as second best out of the series. If it weren't for the relatively bland and boring Chikorita line, these starters probably would have been the coolest of any generation. Totodile, Crocodile, and Typhlosion, in my opinion, were the best looking for their respective evolutionary stages.
The Professor. Yeah, Elm was pretty cool, I guess. Give you Togepi, a really unique Pokemon that was surprisingly viable later on. This helped introduce another feature that I will get into in a second. But first, I have to say, Elm was sort of annoying with all his phone calls. I guess that was more of a problem with this generation, though. Stop calling me. Eggs and breeding. Generation 2 introduced the unique concept of Pokemon breeding, something that really should have been in Generation 1. This led to the decision to create eggs instead of a mammal-like birth for Pokemon. In my opinion, this was a great choice. Everyone has memories of riding their bike up and down a route for hours hatching eggs. Also, it was nice how there was a sweet old couple that took care of your Pokemon while they were constantly having Pokésex in their backyard. Ugh. The story, world, and scenarios. These key points are really the defining pieces of this generation. While the story of being the very best in collecting them all hasn't been removed, the second generation offered some really fun challenging scenarios involving bad guys, legendaries, and lore. Having your rival as this elusive figure who stole Pokemon added to his intrigue. The Togepi egg helped introduce players to eggs and breeding.
The unknowns in the Ruins of Alph, along with its puzzles, added unique experience to the game. The bug catching contest was really well done and allowed you to actually use your Pokemon in catching these other Pokemon. Team Rocket also had many fun, interesting challenges involving stealing Slowpoke tails, taking over Goldenrod's radio station, and carving an underground base to do Pokemon experimentation in Mahogany Town and in the Lake of Rage. The Red Gyarados helped introduce players to the new concept of shinies. It was a nice touch to help visualize how Team Rocket was affecting the world around them. Ecrutique's lore involving legendaries added to the game's mysticism. The wandering legendaries were a very unique idea. All the lore around Celebi was incredible, and it's a shame he wasn't obtainable outside of Japan. Having to go to Kanto to complete the story really added to the game, although I would have preferred that Johto were a bigger region instead of shoehorning Kanto in. But it was still amazing how they could include the entire first game in the second. Battling Red at the end of the game was just the cherry on top. Shinies. The most prized thing in all of Pokemon. Incredibly elusive, but really added to the post-game experience. I've caught a handful of shinies in my day, but they're so rare, it's like one out of every 8,000 or something, that many people who have played these games their entire lives have never even come across one, with the exception of the Red Gyarados. It's even cooler how shinies are naturally stronger than most wild Pokemon. Day and Night Split. This added another dimension to catching Pokemon like Hoot Hoot. The scenery in Pokemon would change as the day went on. The only real problem with this was the convenience. Sometimes you wouldn't be able to play at a certain time of day, but overall this wasn't really a big problem. The rival. Your rival was one fucked up guy, stealing Pokemon and all that, but he provided quite an intriguing character with considerable challenge in facing him. The gyms. Each gym was memorable, but come on. The real story here is Whitney and her demonic cow. That thing could easily mow down your entire team without blinking an udder. They even toned her Miltank down in the remake because it was so infamously strong. The legendaries. Each were incredibly made. I honestly think each of these legendaries is cooler in terms of looks and lore than any of the first generation legendaries, with the exception of maybe Mew. Celebi is one of the best Pokemon of all time in my opinion, in terms of lore, rarity, and appearance. The special stat. Thank goodness that the game developers realized their mistake and split up the stupid special stat into attack and defense. It's about time. There's just so many things this game does right, it's hard to remember them all. I'm sure I forgot some things, but if I did, let me know in the comments. So, what it gets wrong. There isn't enough of it. They only added 100 new Pokemon, and although they were all quality additions, Game Freak really should have put more in, especially because many of the new Pokemon were directly related to Generation 1 Pokemon. There were many pre-evolutions and evolutions added, which didn't really contribute much to the combat, mostly just the collecting aspect of the game. The main quest through Johto also felt shorter than Kanto. They really could have added more to Johto and instead of putting Kanto in the game. I can't really stress this failing enough. Too many of the Pokemon were not brand new. But if Gen 2 is bad in this regard, just wait for my review on Gen 4. Ugh. At least these evolutions and pre-evolutions fit the previous generation style and added something to the game, like babies coming from eggs. So there was still no physical and special split between moves, and I won't detract too many points off of Generation 2 for this problem, because this problem persisted until Generation 4. So you can see my point in the first generation review video if you really want to, but this really screwed over some Pokemon who would otherwise be pretty decent, like Feraligatr. But Feraligatr was good anyway, so it didn't really affect too many. The types. Some types are still under and overpowered. At least they buffed Bug a bit and nerfed Psychic, but it was still incredibly unbalanced. The bad guys. It's Team Rocket, again. They didn't even try to incorporate any new bad guys. Rocket executives also seem lazy, and these leaders lacked any memorable traits. I won't knock this generation too much on this point, however, because I thought many of the Team Rocket scenarios were really well done, like when they took over the radio station in Goldenrod, or when you and Lance had to blow through their secret hideout. It just would have been nice to have a different evil team for a different region. You still can't run. Why? And no one cares about you calling about your Rattata, okay? Like, I don't care if it's the top percentage. Also, why can't I catch Celebi? His lore is amazing and he looks really cool. It's honestly a travesty that you couldn't catch Celebi without the Japanese copy and some wizardry involving a cell phone thing in Japan. What the hell, Game Freak? So just some overall thoughts. This generation really cemented the Pokemon hype generated by the first set of games as a long-term deal. Pokemon wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. It's quite possible that the Crystal version was also the best Game Boy Color game ever made. That's a pretty debatable point, however, so I won't really press on further. That's not the point of this video. Just let me know what you think in the comments. Game Freak really stepped up when it came to all the stories and legends built into the fabric of the Johto region, making this installment of the series unforgettable. So I'm going to have to rate this generation out of 10, overall a 9 out of 10. For the series, I'll put it second best out of all 6 generations. Stay tuned for my upcoming generations. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Thanks for watching.